Hey, we're live. All right, everyone. Hello. This is Grad Chat, where we talk about the taboo, the difficult, the under-discussed, the weirdly discussed topics of grad school and trying to get through academia and just trying to figure out where we stand and how we fit into the system, which has been pointed out very clearly is very broken in so many ways. And we really appreciate you tuning in and seeing how other people have experienced it, asking questions. We're always looking for new guests and very excited today. But before we launch in, I have to do the thing where I ask you to like and subscribe. Thank you to everyone who subscribed last time because we got a huge bump and we were able to change our URL. The more we get, the more people can see us, and hopefully we can help a lot of different people. So my name is Susanna Harris, and I just graduated from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fay Lin, and I'm a PhD candidate in biochemistry at UCLA. And we're really excited because today's grad chat is about standing up for yourself. And for today's guest, we have Nour, a postdoc and neuropharmacologist at Yale. So Nour, if you want to say a bit more about yourself and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nour. My preferred pronouns are she, her. And as Faye said, I'm a postdoc in the psychiatry department studying neuropharmacology. I've been there around a year, and I got my PhD at Georgetown before that.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
What is neuropharmacology, first of all?
The study of I'm trying to say the scientific way, so pharmacologists don't get mad at me for saying it wrong. But the study of the brain and how to develop medication for different illnesses, or like neuropsychiatric illnesses, or just figuring out how the brain works, basically.
Yeah, no, that's super cool, and love seeing your stuff on Twitter, everything from talking about science to social issues to kind of what we're going to talk about today, which is navigating academia. And as maybe people know, maybe not, we actually asked our guests to pick what they would like to talk about. And Nour, you chose standing up for yourself. So what does that mean to you?
When I was thinking about it, I was just thinking about different moments of graduate school and even in postdoc where either something might happen that just doesn't sit right with me, that happens to me, and needing to say something about it, or something as simple as asking for time off, or telling my mentor I need more positive feedback from them. So it's quite a range.
Yeah, Faye, I think we talked about that a little bit last time, didn't we?
Yeah, I think the theme that came to mind when you mentioned that, Nour, is that there's a lot of power dynamics in academia. And when we think about, at least when I think about standing up for myself in academia, I think about how do I do that if I'm a student or even a postdoc who isn't at that faculty level yet. There are a lot of complexities to standing up for yourself, where you have to navigate the system, and all the systemic issues that unfortunately are in academia can be challenging when it comes to really standing up for yourself and voicing your concerns. So, I don't know, from your experience, how have you felt the power dynamic has been a influence in standing up for yourself, or has impacted how you stand up for yourself?
So I've been lucky in that I've had mentors that have been humble enough that I've been able to go to them. Like my PhD mentor, I remember one time I just had like a breaking point and I went to him, and he actually was like, I'm doing something wrong. Like, what do you need from me? And I told him I need more positive feedback. And he was always open to me telling him kind of what I needed. And I think because he was open, it helped me develop these like skills, or like the muscles to kind of talk to him about things I needed. And that kind of branched out to other people. And so when it's with other people, what I usually do, I think I send my emails to other people first and have them read it. And I'll send it to other PIs that I'm friends with, be like, how would you take this? Because I'm 32, almost 32 years old, so I have some friends who are PIs, which that's a little imposter syndrome for me. But I'll send them an email and be like, hey, how would you feel if your student came up to you and said this? And we'll talk about it, and they'll tell me that, yeah, I wouldn't take that well, or I would. And I guess that's very lucky for me that I've had that to be able to kind of bounce ideas off people of what's okay and what's not. Or like how, but obviously each person is different, but for me, that's how I've chosen to navigate it.
Yeah, I like the part, the part that really resonates is that it sounds like you've kind of built on these skills of that you had this good interaction, and this interaction that kind of affirmed you, and then have continued to seek that out.
Yeah.
Have you had times where you've actually like really needed that backbone of having done this successfully?
Needed in the sense of I needed it for myself emotionally. Something had happened and I needed to stand up for myself. And I sent this email that was really scary to send. But I also sent it a day where I was feeling horrible. And I think I just kind of was like, you know what, I'm already feeling horrible. Let's just add to the day. But sorry, going back to your question. Yeah, I think, yes, having the good interactions in small instances helps for the big times you do need it. And I think the more you practice it for the small things, the easier it becomes when you have to, kind of like pull out the big guns for a more important thing for something that you are a little more afraid to do, or it might be a bigger power dynamic. And standing up for yourself doesn't necessarily mean you doing it alone. I think it's perfectly fine to call in your support network to help you. You can have someone stand up with you. And I think that's always important to remember. Having another mentor be there with you is very important.
Yeah, I love all these pieces that you're bringing together. So one important piece that I heard was that you don't have to stand up for yourself alone, and you can bring in new mentors. I think that's such an important point, especially in academia, when we mentioned in the beginning there's this power dynamic that we have to navigate. And I think this other thing that you said that also resonated with me was that you can do it step by step or in pieces, or it might be a process to figure out the way to stand up for yourself, if it's to gain confidence or figuring out a way that works best for you, or the current system that you're in. And I think those are all great tips when it comes to standing up for yourself. I think we had one question sent in that has to do with looking for that support network or mentor when it comes to standing up for yourself. And it says, what characteristics do you look for in your new mentor, and what new questions did you ask them lab members?
Yeah, I think I built it off two things I liked in my previous mentor that was good, and things that I didn't like in the previous mentor that wasn't good. I don't know if that made sense. I based it off things I liked in my PhD mentor, and then the 1 year postdoc that was bad. So I ask questions like, you know, do you expect me to work 7 days a week? Or is that a requirement? Because some people will be very outright, you know, yes, I expect you to be there. And even if they don't say it, you could tell that they expect you to be there. I also kind of asked, if an experiment fails, how would you react? Or I don't like the word fails, but like if an experiment just gives me negative data or doesn't work, how would you react? And so I asked very pointed questions to see his response about these things, because just from my negative experiences, I realized those were things that mattered to me. And I actually was looking for someone who wasn't just very active in lab. I was looking for someone who did a lot of outside activity as well, who gave talks about not just science, but, you know, about, like, for example, my mentor gives a talk about mental health. He's giving one on July 2nd through SFN, by the way, a plug-in for him. Oh, well, I don't think it's mental health. I think it's racial issues on the 2nd. But still, really cool one. You should check it out. You know, someone who kind of cared, had the same ideals I did. So those were the main things I was looking for. But one thing about a good support network, I remember when I was leaving my lab, that was bad and quite abusive. Obviously, it was a difficult time because, you know, I was trying to apply to jobs without letting my current mentor know that I was applying to jobs. So I was, you know, reaching out to people and being kind of saying, you know, don't reach out to my current mentor. And it was difficult because to the people that I was reaching out to, I was the stranger, you know, who they didn't know. And they, you know, some of them knew my current mentor at the time. And even though it was superficial, they knew him more than they knew me. So it's hard to kind of take my word at it. Even though that sucks for me, but it's the truth. But then that's when I had several professors at Yale say they'll reach out to professors for me and say, I have a postdoc that's looking for a position who's not in a good position now. I will vouch for them that they are a good person, they are a good scientist. And that's how I was able to get my position. And that meant so much, and that helped so much, that they stood up for me. They had the power, and they had the voice that they could do that. And they just rolled with it, which I truly appreciated.
That's great. That's really great to hear. And I think last time Rob talked about, so Rob Ulrich, and one of the topics we got into was also this idea that all of this work does not have to be done by yourself. Like, part of standing up for yourself is finding the people who will do those things for you. I don't know anyone who can drive change by themselves, especially when up against somebody who is abusive or who just doesn't want to listen, right?
Yeah.
And with that power dynamic, Fay, that you were talking about, for a lot of people, it just doesn't matter. Like, for a lot of people, they don't care what grad students have to say. They don't care what their mentees have to say. I think the majority do. And I think there's some people who are actively fighting for this change. But for the people who don't care, it doesn't matter. You could have 50 grad students and they would say, they're all whining. But you talk to someone higher up, at least you have a chance of getting their ear, or at least those people have the power to get you into a better situation.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Fay, did you want to ask the question that's highlighted here in the doc?
Yeah, so this was a question that we got that is definitely related to what we've been covering. So it says, do you find it more difficult to stand up for yourself as a minority woman? Do you get more judgment than others doing the same? If so, how do you deal with that?
Yes. I I think there's always that fear of you're being difficult, you're being annoying, you're being overdramatic. And I think it's probably worse for Black women who are seen like as, you know, the like there's that stereotype of like the angry Black women. So they like, I know my friends who are Black women in science, like they are like, oh, I have to be so nice because, you know, if I even show a hint of like emotion, it's seen as like I'm angry, which is like, I don't even like what I have to deal with is not even a fraction of that. But yeah, when you are, you know, not the mainstream person, you are, anything you say that's going to make someone challenge themselves is seen as difficult. And it's unfortunate. But there was a Chelsea on Twitter sent me a graphic she made of how she deals with that in the field when people bring that up of like, oh, like, you know, you're being difficult or something like that. So I can send that to you later. But it's I don't have it memorized, so I can't tell you, but yeah, I kind of just rambled. Did that answer? I don't know.
I think so. I mean, yeah, and to that point of, you know, there are these just, I mean, microaggressions, right? These little pieces. It's not, I think maybe people are talking about this more than they used to, which is great. But yeah, are you talking about Chelsea Herbst? Chelsea? Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, she's great.
I like her Nour stuff and her adorable little lizards.
I know.
But also like just talking super openly about this work. Yeah, I guess, you know, we've got this interesting question in the YouTube comments, and it kind of goes towards that topic. But it's someone asking that, you know, basically being in the thick of racial or diversity issues, how even this could change based on your personal identification, or specifically talking about born outside the US, these like international students, you know, it could extend out to LGBTQ, other things like that. Are these things that you think about in your diversity work and in these different causes that you're invested in?
Sorry, the question.
You're fine. So basically, you know, I think going to that point of all of these different types of reactions, and it does seem like there's a huge amount of intersectionality about it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Kind of just thinking about that, how do you think that also could drive the differences and abilities to stand up for yourself?
Yeah, I think each person's identity is so complex, and if you are dealing with if you have multiple identities that are going on, not going on, but, you know, if you identify with multiple underrepresented or marginalized groups, it gets harder. But I think, I'm not sure if I'm getting to your answer, but I think having like people who, I think first of all, having validation really helps for me. So seeing other people being like, no, you're justified in being bothered by that. It's okay. Like, you know, that was right. Like, what you're feeling is fine. And I think especially having people who, and then having that like from other people that, you know, identify like you, but having then people who aren't identifying like you, who are supporting you. Like we had a general like department meeting the other day, and one thing that we said was, you know, when someone speaks up about something that's bothering them, like an incident, is for people to listen and not to say, well, was that racist? Or like, was that sexist? And it's like, yes, it was. Like, we don't need to go into it. And like, we've seen that come up, a lot on Twitter, where people are like, well, it wasn't that bad what was said. And it's like, I don't know. It's not really worth going into it. If someone is telling you or expressing that they're bothered by something, I feel like that matters. And you should listen, because their voice matters and their feelings matter.
Yeah. Well, and something that Fay and I have talked about, and Fay, you can probably speak to this even better than I can, but that a lot of times when you're standing up for yourself, you're also standing up for other people. That idea of that validation. There's a lot of times where we'll feel, I can speak from the mental health side of speaking out about things. And it's like, oh, I should be able to deal with this. Or it's, I'm supposed to struggle, or at least it's not X, right?
Yeah.
And when I hear someone else say, yeah, I'm dealing with this situation and it's really hard, it's sort of like, oh, okay, this isn't just me making up excuses. This is actually a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Fay, you've experienced this sort of thing, right?
Yeah. What I'm hearing from these discussions is this idea that we have to point out that there are issues in the system. And I think we were also talking about this beforehand, where is that line between, it's imposter syndrome and, I feel like I don't belong, but it's really like, is it imposter syndrome where it's internal, or is it the external environment with so many issues that is telling me that I don't belong here? And those are two maybe separate, but also very related things, where I think sometimes part of the reason change is kind of slow is because sometimes when we stand up for ourselves and voice these issues and point out these issues, I think sometimes the pushback comes back to, oh, well, but, work on yourself, you belong here. Yeah, for sure you belong here. But at the same time, we see so much systemic issues, if it's like racism or sexism or all kinds of things that could be better in academia that make it difficult to stand up for ourselves or help us gain self-confidence. So I really think that that's a very important piece to the puzzle, that just stating head on that there's an issue here. Like, it's difficult to stand up for yourself, and that is because there's a broken system here, and we gotta do something about it.
Let's see. Kind of totally to switch it, but I think it's important. I had a question of like, why did you choose to do a postdoc? Like, what are your career goals? To kind of think about that, and then I think that does drive your ability to stand up for yourself if you're driving towards something.
I wanted to go into academia, and well, that was one of my career options. So I applied to postdocs, and I was like, I want to do a postdoc. I want to see if this is the right thing for me before I write anything off. And so that's why I applied. That's why I'm doing a postdoc, because the only way to know if it's right is to do it. And because, I was a little, towards the end of your PhD, I was a little, what's the word? I felt kind of heartbroken by academia. And especially after my first year postdoc, I was definitely like, I wanted out of academia. But I'm really glad I was able to find another postdoc, because like my love for science got reignited. But yeah, I think having something, knowing that this is what you want to do helps. But like Fay was saying, when you have someone like pushing you down for so long, it's hard to stand up for yourself when you have like a system that keeps telling you, you don't belong. And hey, look, like no one looks like you in the upper ranks. That doesn't help either.
Something that I saw in the when you did the Instagram takeover for us, which was really fun. I love to watch people's stories, and I don't know, I see you all the time on Twitter and on Instagram, but then I'm like, oh yeah, you speak.
Oh yeah.
Different. Yeah, but you talked a little bit about the fact that you wear a hijab, and that's not something you see a lot. I actually have another friend whose name is Nour, but without the O. And she was, I think, one of a handful of people that I ever interacted with at UNC who wore one, and she had stories.
Yeah. I've only known a handful that are professors. I've never really had a PI that I've had the opportunity to possibly work in their lab who wears the scarf or the hijab. So that's kind of difficult. It's not having someone that looks like you. Because part of you're like, oh, is it because people are being pushed out, or I don't know, a lot of things start to come to mind, like why, there's plenty of people that are going, because in classes in grad school, there's a lot of people, in undergrad, there's a lot of girls who wore the hijab that were in the bio classes. So there's definitely a drop off at some point. And you wonder where that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool about kind of the trajectory, and it's as far as going to a postdoc and thinking about academia, and have recent experiences changed your feeling about academia, like where it's going? Sorry, I know I'm throwing you curveballs, but
it's a little hard to say because there's definitely conversations that are happening that haven't happened before. But I don't think it's that major of a change, not to be pessimistic. Just because, I don't know, I've seen these little ups and downs often before. But maybe I'm just pessimistic. I don't know.
I think that's realistic. I think that it has to, we have to have hope for something better, but it's not going to be all roses, and it's not going to be like, let's make it beautiful. It's so good. Let's make it beautiful. I mean,
yeah, no,
I mean, it's only effort that's going to change it. But yeah, it's the reality of it. All right. We've got a really good question from Justin. Kind of switching back. Where'd it go? Our chat's going off. Come back, Justin. Okay. No, I lost him. I think I just.
I think I see it.
Maybe. There we go. Found it. Kind of what are some neutral questions that can be asked to gauge responses to see if the PI or environment is unhealthy?
God, there are so many questions. I'm trying to think of some that are. I think, I guess it depends where the situation is. But you can ask about the turnover rate, how long people stay in the lab. You can ask about how often people take vacations or take time off. And I guess that's a little bit of a loaded question, because then, so my sister's only 4 years older than me, but she did computer science in a time where not a lot of women were doing computer science. So we always kind of have very differing opinions on things. And it comes to stuff where I'm like, well, I'm just doing I'm standing up for myself. And she's like, no, you're being very aggressive. Because to her, she didn't have that opportunity to stand up for herself like that. Because if I tell her I'm asking about time off, she'd be like, you're being seen as lazy if you ask that. So that's why I'm like, that's not a neutral question for her. But let me think about that for a little. Because I do remember red flags coming off on different questions that were very simple. I just not coming to mind right now. But turnover rate is a big one. You can figure out how often people leave. If people are leaving the lab in under a year, that's a big thing. Because there's no, like, people don't leave science in under a year. Not PhD students, not postdocs.
Right. Well, and even if we were going to say, I mean, I'm very much a contrarian in so many ways. So my brain immediately jumps to like, well, but what if, like, first of all, yes, absolutely yes. That's a horrible sign. And I have never seen that happen and been like, oh, this is actually a great lab. Just like, wow, a coincidence. The other thing too, is that let's say these are all people who don't want to stay in science. They come in and they don't want to be there. That's still a mark on the PI, and that's still a mark on the environment, that they're choosing people who are not a good fit in terms of wanting to actively stay.
Oh, and that's another thing you can ask about, like going to conferences. That will give you a little bit of an idea of, or like taking courses. Because then like they can reveal themselves a little of like, oh no, you know, we don't, like if someone's like, oh, we don't want to get scooped, or, you know, you don't really learn from conferences or courses, and, or like asking about like, oh, do you go, like how often do you go give talks or stuff like that? Because I remember someone said, I knew said, oh, I only go give talks or like I only go to conferences where I'm invited to give talks. And I was like, okay. Good for you. Like there's a lot of conferences you can go to and learn from that you're not invited to, but good job. And you know, that for me was a red sign, like a red flag, right? But he didn't realize that he was giving a red flag.
Yeah, Nour, I love what you said. I think it was in the beginning when you were answering like what are these neutral questions you can ask. And you were saying that some questions may seem neutral, but not really. For example, I think you brought up like asking about how much time people can take off. And in some ways that may not really be a neutral question, because it can come off as like, oh, are you not passionate or whatever, which in my mind, that's also part of the broken system that we've been talking about in academia, where if me asking this question is a reflection of my passion in science and like whether or not I'm fit for science, like that also tells me, like if that's what the PI or whoever I'm talking to, if that's their interpretation, that also tells me that I don't know if I want to work with this person.
Exactly.
Yeah, who doesn't prioritize self-care and prioritizing wellness when it comes to science. So I think like in asking these questions, and it's really come up in our discussion so far, that in the way that they answer them, like not just like the content of what they're saying, but maybe if they give you attitudes like, oh, like we're passionate here and we don't take time off. If they say something like that, you also get a sense of what kind of environment it is. And I think it's really valuable to also maybe go and ask the non-neutral questions. And that also gives you information and really exposes any bad environment or evidence of a bad environment.
That's true.
Up front.
Yeah, because if someone is a good PI, a non-neutral question won't throw them. We'll be like, yeah, take time off. Simple.
And based on like I've seen, so it took me 6 years to get through grad school, and so I got to see a lot of people, postdocs and grad students, interview. And I think as an incoming grad student, as an undergrad, so Justin was telling us that they are in a cohort of undergrads getting ready to start this year's cycle of the PhD program application process, which good luck, it's tricky, you can do this, and it's so impressive that people go through that process. I didn't realize until afterwards. I was like, wow, that was rough. But I think when I was interviewing, I had this idea that I was trying to prove like, oh, I'm, please take me. And I feel like with this vantage, and I didn't want to make anyone upset, and I didn't want to, like ruffle any feathers. But on the other side, I look at it, and if somebody comes in and they're just like, I love everything and it's fine, and I'll just ask you about like what equipment you have, and whatever you say is great, I'm actually more concerned about them. And yeah, they are like, oftentimes they will end up in a lab that's the only kind of questions you can even ask. So I think,
and it's hard for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting to the end. I want to ask one more question and then kind of open the floor if there's anything else that you want to make sure to talk about. But Sean Lewis asked, how can privileged colleagues leverage that privilege to stop this kind of harassment? And how can we act as a buffer and help create space, especially in terms of like standing up for others?
I think the least that someone can do is listen and accept it when someone tells you something's wrong. And not ask questions like, is it actually racist? Is it actually this? I hear you, but any qualifying kind of questions are not really great. And then kind of being willing sometimes to be the person to reach out to, if something was said during seminar, for example, by a PI, being the one to reach out to the PI, or at least telling another PI to reach out to the PI. I think there's that. There was that article that was sent around last week about actions that white scientists can do to leverage their privilege. And it's a lot more eloquent than what I just said. But for me, for like standing up, I think having people listen and not invalidate my feelings or what I'm going through is very important.
I don't know. One of my least favorite phrases right now is like, I'm listening, I'm hearing you, I'm learning. And I'm like, how about just thank you? Like, it's still so self-centering when you're like, I am doing these things. It's still not about the other person. And I know it's said in a lot of times in ways that people are not trying to make things worse, but it's a doing situation. Is there anything else that you want to make sure to talk about?
I don't know. I'm better with questions.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, Sean says, thank you, Nour. That's very helpful.
Yeah,
so
of course.
That's really cool.
According to Merriam-Webster, of service or assistance, useful, a helpful neighbor, helpful advice, just trying to be helpful.
There is nothing quite funnier than literally a conversation about how can you be helpful just by like shutting up and listening, and my phone being like, by the way, the word helpful means this. Really channeled that.
Live, woo. But, I think this topic about allyship is really, really important to talk about in this discussion. And I really like what you said, Susanna, about these statements where you're saying I'm listening and I'm there. I think is a first step, right? And they only get so far. Like, listening is great, definitely do it, and definitely focus on how you can educate yourself and learn from others. And I think it's also important to recognize that we need to turn some of these I'm listening into action items. Or, ooh, cat.
Sorry.
I told you, Nour. The cat showed up earlier. I was like, every time there's a cat.
Cat. But allyship. So I think it's important to think about action items, and also back to the idea of power dynamic. If you are someone who has power or is at a place of privilege, using that privilege to talk to other faculty members or your colleagues, where sometimes it's much harder for grad students or postdocs to voice that concern.
Yeah.
That is especially important. And I think it does need to go beyond I'm listening and sometimes, we see all these broad statements of, oh, I support this movement, I am anti-racist, but it has to be a bit more than that, a lot more than that, if we want to get to, if we want things to change.
Yeah. For sure. I think that I bring up the listening part just because I honestly think that's where the fallout happens. I think people are just not fully listening. I'm sorry.
No, this is great.
I don't think people are really listening and taking it in. And I think another part is really breaking down your ego. And that's something I'm working on as well, is when someone says you've said something that's harmful or done something that's wrong, that's, it's like someone said something that called me out last week on something I said, and it was innocent, I didn't mean it, but that doesn't matter, it came off in a certain way, and I had my feelings about it, but I apologized, I deleted the tweet, and at first I tried to explain, and then I was like, you know what, no, I'm gonna delete that tweet too, because it doesn't matter, like, just apologize. It really takes down, like, breaking down your ego, and like it's okay to feel anxious about it. Like, I felt anxious, I felt sad, and I was talking to my friend about it, and it's like fine to feel that, because that's how you feel when you make a mistake, but it's just about not letting that skew your view of what you are fighting for and how you're going to react to someone calling you in, for example.
I like this conversation went full circle of, like, how to stand up for yourself, but also how to stand up for somebody else when they're standing up for themselves, and how to deal with it when someone's standing up for themselves with you, because exactly, it doesn't feel good when you're like, oh shoot, that's not what I meant to do at all. And I love that was your tact of taking down the tweet, thinking about the explanation, but generally it just doesn't, the explanation just doesn't matter. It just doesn't. If it's a place of innocence, then, I think it's great to have an apology tweet. I think that's fantastic. And I love when people put up something when they're like, I really messed up the other day, and this is how I messed up, especially if they're like, this is why it's not good and why I'm going to change it going forward. Yeah. Because I think hopefully people will assume that you made a mistake, and also clarifying it was a mistake, here's all my reason. It really never makes you look better. I've never seen someone do that and be like, oh, I see, this was totally valid. I'm glad they, it's really hard. And I love that you do that.
It's something I want to keep working on. It's definitely important, because it's hard, especially, like, it doesn't matter how, like, obviously it's nicer if people call you out in a nice way or stand up for themselves in a nice way, but sometimes in the heat of the moment on Twitter, it might not be the nicest way, and it's fine. Like, you have to remember that, like, people are not just interacting with you, they're interacting with just a little they are dealing with a lot of things, and you're just one person that's given them what was I saying? You're one person who has contributed to trauma in their life. So it might not be the nicest response, and it sucks, but it's okay.
Nour, I love how you're emphasizing listening, because I do think it is a step that people can improve on, and I think it is a really reachable, tangible step that people can improve on, that is within reach. Action items are great. They seem like they do require a bit more effort, whereas listening, you can stop talking, you can listen.
Yeah.
And that's very attainable, and yet so many people don't do that. And you also see on Twitter so many people maybe the response is getting defensive. Well, it's like, oh, but I've been doing all of this other stuff to support other people, so what are you saying? And that's just such evident not listening. You're making it about you. You are not right. It's not leading to anything productive if it's just this back and forth. Well, I'm not listening, I've already done all this stuff, I'm shutting you out. That's not productive. And whereas I could easily be better if we just take a step back, stop, listen. So I do think that is such a fantastic thing to highlight. Like, listening is so important, and it is also so important to do more than listen. But the first step, listen. Right, you got to do that first step.
Yeah, you really do.
For sure. So that really, it can still be very powerful to listen. If you're not listening. So
I mean, and I think that on the flip side, there are going to be people that want to tear you down because they have their own opinions and they don't, I think that finding those people who will tell you straight, like, this isn't appropriate. I have a handful of people in my life that I talk to, and they will come into my DMs and they'll say, hey, you said something that seems to go against your values, and I think you want to change that. I've also had people be downright abusive online. I've had people just and they make it about themselves. And, and part of that listening exercise is being able to listen, not react, and think about, because you don't have to apologize for everything. There's a lot of things that you also have to stand up for yourself, right? This back and forth. And there are always, it's about, what do you want to stand for? How do you want to be a better person? And trying to understand, where is this other person coming from? And if it's malice, just kind of that forgiveness and saying, you know what, you're detracting from this conversation. I'm just going to ignore this for now. So if you feel like I am subtweeting you verbally right now, that is because I am. Nour knows what's going on.
Yes.
But I think everyone should follow you. If I know that you've had some situations going on that make it really difficult, but you're just a rock star. I love, you talked about, you talked a little bit at the start of this about, I love that you started talking about how some of your PIs had the humility and were humble enough to take this. And I think that's something that I just really look up to you for, is that when you have found things that you're like, I didn't quite mean that, or like, this is not something, I've never seen you get defensive. I've only ever seen you try.
I feel like I have, but thank you. It's something I'm working on, but thank you.
I mean, there's a difference between, I've definitely had times where I've been like, no, you're wrong. And then I'm like, all right, we're not making this better. But no,
it's something I'm actively working on. It's cool. It's important. Just seeing how many people have been hurt by the defensiveness lately, I've seen how important it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Fay, you want to take us out of here?
Yeah, so thanks everyone for tuning into this episode of Grad Chat, where we talked about standing up for yourself. Thank you, Nour, for being a great guest and giving us all our insights.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was such a great conversation. And I guess we will see you all next time.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you very soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.